I could ask you a lot of things, but I think that the thing that most of us here want to hear from you are your impressions about, the two major cities that you were in, Belgrade and Niš, of course. What are your thoughts about the people, the culture, the food? Have you had any problems, issues? Would you like to go back, right?
Yeah. No, I would like to go back. Although, you keep bringing up the notion of food, if you look at me, I'm not big on eating, right? So
I think that we as a nation aim to change that.
Right, okay. Well, I will definitely be back, and I know that there's 2.5 more translations to come, so when the series is completed, I will be very, very happy to come back.
So that's a thing that has been asked of you. As far as I know, this is your third time in Serbia, and you were asked that when you were here first in Belgrade on ZmajKon 2016, and then you were asked that a lot in Niš. And it seems that it's a perpetuating mystery among the Serbian readers. Why do you cross your name when you sign your books?
Right. How many people know the writer David Gemmell? Yeah? All right. Well, I was at a signing where he was also signing books, and he was sitting beside me, and I was watching him, and he was crossing out his name. And so I asked him, why do you cross out your name when you're signing? He says, well, the printed version is simply the one that's in the book. But because it's going to be personalized, you eliminate that one, and you fill in the space with your actual signature. And I thought that was really cool, so I've done that ever since.
Yeah, sure. That's a great story. And David Gemmell is a great writer, right?
He's a great writer. Yeah.
So we got a question from.
Yes, Danny.
That didn't take long. Did it?
We have 3 questions.
Yeah, the first one.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm the guy who was running late yesterday in Niš, if you remember, during the signing.
It's all a blur. It was all a blur.
I know. Anyway, so I had a question. So every time you ask somebody to describe you, Malazan, in one word, it's like most of the time, it's complexity, right? It really is. So having said that, during your entire writing process, inevitably, I guess, there were some challenges, like difficulty and complexity drives certain challenges, right? So, what was like the most fun thing for you, and what was the most difficult or tough thing, if you will?
They were both the same thing, but I can't give you too much in the way of spoilers because it's not been translated yet. But there were 3 scenes in the last book that were in my head when I finished the first book. And so I had, basically 11 years to wait before I got to those scenes. And so I had the dialogue, I had the descriptions in my head, I had the visual, if you will, of those scenes. And then as I was getting closer and closer and closer, I got more and more nervous because I was afraid that I would not be able to pull off the scenes that I had imagined and envisioned over 11 years. So that was, so a bit of both.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. And those scenes haunted me. I mean, they just haunted me through the books.
Hello?
Hello.
I have a question. So, were there any historical events that you've drawn inspiration for certain events in your books?
There are, but generally I try to make sure that it's not really recognizable, so that it's fully within its own world. But I think the British retreat through Afghanistan, through Kabul, in the 19th century, was a major inspiration for the chain of dogs in Dead House Gates. Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, this will be a bit too long question and plus on nerves. So I'm interested in parallels between when you were creating your world, were there parallels between high magic and nuclear weapons? Because in the same way, they are afraid to use it, like the Malazan kingdom and other kingdoms, because they will attract the other high forces, and that the soldiers are almost useless when it comes to those nuclear weapons. And was this the theme when you were writing it?
Yes and no. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it, but yes, that notion of convergence of power is kind of mutually assured destruction. That's a good point. But I think what really inspired both myself and Ian Eslamont was Glenn Cook's Black Company. And one of the reasons, at the time that I was reading that, I was in a writing program, but I was also studying Vietnam War literature. And I saw this immediate parallel. And of course, I found out later that Glenn had been in the Vietnam War and was a veteran. But there was an element there where you had a sense that you had the soldiers, boots on the ground kind of thing, and magic was this literally napalm from the skies. And so, yeah, they kept their heads down as best they could. And that sort of struck us as kind of realistic. I mean, we have, like you say, it's a massive weapon, potentially. And you can only do what you can in the face of that. But of course, in the gaming as well as in the books, we eventually came up with this thing called Lateral, which was designed to negate the magic, and that kind of leveled the playing field again.
Hello,
Sorry.
I have a question because I'm writing in my free time, and I just wanted to know, I'm 18, when you were my age, who are your idols in terms of writers, and who are the people that inspire you today?
When I was 18, 19, I guess Stephen R. Donaldson. His Lord Fowlsbane is the first book of the Thomas Covenant trilogy. And subsequently, I think there's, 10 or 11 books now. That stuff really struck me as if this was the first time I saw epic fantasy that was written strictly for adults. Because a lot of the stuff previous to that, you could read it as a teenager or even younger. And you could actually, reread it later and you'd get more out of it. But Donaldson's stuff was definitely an adult-themed fantasy. And it felt like he kind of dragged the genre into adulthood. So that was a huge inspiration. Also, he was one of the few writers where I had to have a dictionary beside me too, because his usage of his Latinate words was extraordinary. And so I learned a lot from him. To this day, I'm inspired by a lot of writers, but I'm reading science fiction primarily and nonfiction. So one writer I would recommend would be Becca Chambers, a science fiction writer. She's amazing.
Hello. I found information that while you were writing the second book, near the end, your computer crashed.
I was writing what became the third book, Memories of Ice. I thought it was going to be the second.
I just wanted to ask how you pushed through that process after it happened. And
Well, I didn't. I mean, I think it was about 240 pages in, actually, and it just all disappeared on me. So I was so heartbroken that I decided that the second book would be Dead House Gates, because I couldn't immediately start again on Memories of Ice. And as it turned out, it was the best option. It was a better choice by far. Yeah.
Hi. I would like to know if there's any way to know how many more books will there be in the Malazan universe?
I'm not sure how many Cam's got still planned, 2 or 3 at least. And the Witness trilogy that I'm working on now it's turning out to be 4 books, not 3. I'm in the middle of, I was writing the second one when I realized that it's actually 2 novels. And I have about a month's worth of writing for each of those 2 novels. So I'll be able to deliver them to the publisher almost back to back. So once those are done, then I'm going straight to Walk in Shadow, which is the 3rd in the Carcanis trilogy. And then when that one's cleared, I finish off this 4-book trilogy, this Witness, where we finally get to see Karsa Orlog. Even though it's called the Karsa trilogy or whatever, but actually he only shows up in the last book. Oh, and I have 2 novellas I'm under contract for.
So we got a question from the Danas daily newspapers, and after that I'm gonna ask you the last question for the evening. So the Danas of today wants to know, how do you see the future of the Fantastika? Because the reality in which we live is increasingly fantastic.
That's interesting. I mean, historically, fantasy as a genre reaches its highest levels of sort of popularity when the real world has become increasingly miserable. There seems to be a kind of a connection between those two. And of course, one could argue that there's an escapist element to that. Sorry. So what was the second half of that?
Yeah, you kind of answered it all, but Tanya has a question, and then I'd like to ask you.
No, I think I had more to answer that one. So if you could do that one again, yeah.
So how do you see the future of Fantastika?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think we're probably heading back in that direction. There was a period where a lot of the popular fantasy, became something that was recently branded as grimdark. And grimdark, as far as I can understand it, was a sort of revisiting of an earlier style of fantasy, especially sword and sorcery, but with a nihilistic kind of bent to it, flavor to it. So there was a sense of these were stories that were ultimately almost reveling in the meaninglessness of life. And when I remember taking a look at some of this stuff and thinking, well, this is going to be short-lived. There will be a response to it, where writers are starting to explore a better or a greater sense of hope, and I think that is coming.
I'm just curious, what do you think about AI?
Well, first of all, AI as it's presently created is not AI. It's simply a plagiarism program. That's basically what it does. So there's nothing in there, with respect to singularity or sentience or self-awareness. It's simply an iterative program. Yeah. But it's potentially disastrous for the arts. Yeah.
So the last question for this evening, and the last questions for your stay in Serbia. Over the last 5 days, you got to know a lot of Serbs and a lot of Serbian readers. So did you get a certain sense of Serbian reader of your novel, Serbian reader of fantasy, and do we have a couple of thoughts from you about our readers?
Yeah, you ask questions that other readers don't ask. Quite often I'm at conventions in North America and elsewhere, and I get the same questions over and over and over again. I have not been getting that here. I'm getting very interesting questions, so it's been a pleasure to answer all of those questions.
So, Mr. Erikson's novel, the first novel of the Karsa Orlong trilogy in 4 books, is titled The God Is Not Willing, but God willing, we will talk with him again. So keep buying books, keep reading books, and be happy. Thank you.